Everyone online has advice on becoming a millionaire. Crypto, real estate, side hustles. But advice is just one person's story. Data shows what actually works.
One success story only proves something is possible. It doesn't tell you how likely it is. Most people don't walk one perfect path. They face many different outcomes.
We usually hear from the one person who made it, not from the thousands who followed the same advice and ended up somewhere else. That's how stories distort reality. One story tells you almost nothing. But when you look at millions of lives together, patterns start to appear. That's where truth lives. So instead of listening to one loud success story, Ryan does something different. He steps back, looks at millions of real lives together, and watches what repeats, not what just sounds impressive. Ryan stops listening to the loudest voices in the room. He ignores the advice that depends on luck, timing, or hype. Instead, he watches what repeats across millions of real lives, again and again. At first, everything looks different. Different people, different paths, different lives. But when you zoom out far enough, the same patterns keep showing up. That's the moment everything changes. When you stop chasing every story and start paying attention to what shows up again and again. The first pattern isn't dramatic. No huge wins, no extreme moves, just the same small action repeated steadily, year after year. Most people try to rush it. They save aggressively for a while, then stop completely. The pattern that actually works is quieter and far more consistent. This isn't about willpower, it's about structure. When saving happens automatically, effort disappears and consistency survives. Life doesn't stay smooth. Jobs change, expenses spike, kids arrive, crises happen. The people who build wealth don't stop saving when this happens. They let the system keep running. Sometimes the pace slows down. Saving 25% becomes 15 or 12. But it doesn't go to zero. That pause is temporary, not a permanent stop. And when the pressure passes, they don't stay stuck at the lower rate. The system expands again. Saving increases. Momentum quietly returns. Here's what most people miss. Millionaires didn't start by saving 25%. Early on, their savings looked completely normal. But as income grew, their savings rate grew with it. When income increases, two paths open up. One path lets lifestyle expand with every raise. The other captures those increases and quietly redirects them into saving and investing. Over time, the gap becomes enormous.
Nothing about their income was special. The timeline was the same. The difference came from one quiet decision, repeated over decades, capturing growth instead of spending it.
Here's the uncomfortable truth. You cannot save your way to $1 million. Saving alone feels safe, but inflation quietly drains it away. Without investing, the tub never fills. Saving feels safe, the number doesn't move. But inflation is always working in the background, slowly reducing what that money can actually buy. Stability is an illusion. Now compare that to investing. The money doesn't just sit there. It grows, it compounds. Over long periods of time, growth quietly overwhelms inflation. When you look at the data, one line stands out clearly: people who invest and people who don't. Over time, that single difference explains an enormous gap in outcomes. Participation changes everything. Something interesting happens at a certain point. Below it, most wealth stays parked in cash and homes. But beyond that threshold, portfolios start to change. Growth takes over. Cash feels safe. It doesn't move. It doesn't fluctuate. But over time, that sense of safety quietly breaks down. The risk isn't volatility. It's erosion. Markets fall. They crash. They scare people out at the worst moments. But over long periods of time, the trend moves upward for those who stay invested. This part surprises a lot of people. Most millionaires aren't brilliant investors. They don't time markets. They don't pick winning stocks. They just participate and stay invested. This is the most important decision you'll ever make. Not which fund, not which strategy, not perfect timing. Just getting invested at all.
This is the part most people get wrong. An imperfect investor who stays invested beats someone with perfect knowledge who never starts. Progress beats precision.
This is where many people get stuck. They start debating details, strategies, and optimizations, all before they've even built the first small foundation.
But when you look at the data, the story becomes much simpler. You don't need perfect decisions. You need consistent participation over a very long time.
This is where the gap really opens up. The vast majority of millionaires consistently use tax-advantaged accounts.
Most other households don't. That participation gap compounds for decades.
This isn't about being clever. It's not about perfect choices. The data shows something much simpler. The people who participate consistently win.
They don't start and stop. They don't wait for the perfect moment. They fund these accounts year after year without interruption. The data shows this very clearly. You don't build large balances with occasional contributions. You get there by funding accounts consistently, year after year, without stopping. The data shows a very clear order of decisions. First, contribute it all. Second, capture any employer match. Third, increase contributions toward annual limits. Only after that does optimization matter. Sequence matters more than strategy.
The foundation decision is simple. Are you contributing at all? Without this step, none of the others matter. Every outcome in the data starts here. The second decision is just as straightforward. Are you contributing enough to capture the employer match? If you're not, you're leaving guaranteed returns on the table. The data treats this as non-optional. Once the match is captured, the next step is increasing contributions. As income rises, contributions rise with it. This is how accounts reach meaningful balances over time. Only after the basics are handled does optimization matter. Roth versus traditional affects taxes, not participation. This choice fine-tunes outcomes. It does not create them. Advanced strategies come last. Roth conversions, backdoor contributions. These only matter after substantial balances exist. They refine results. They don't create them. The first advantage is automation. Money is diverted before it reaches your checking account. There's no monthly decision, no reliance on discipline. Contributions happen by default. The second advantage is beneficial friction. Early withdrawals trigger penalties and taxes. That extra cost forces a pause before acting. In volatile markets, that pause prevents costly mistakes. Here's what the data shows. In taxable accounts, returns are reduced every year by dividend and capital gains taxes. Research shows this tax drag cuts returns by about 1 to 2% annually. Over decades, the data is clear on sequencing. When balances are small, the difference between Roth and traditional is minimal. What matters first is contributing consistently. Optimization only becomes meaningful after accounts reach substantial size. This is when optimization actually matters. At higher incomes and larger account balances, tax brackets start affecting long-term outcomes. That's where Roth versus traditional decisions can change results, not at the beginning. The data shows something important. Most millionaires didn't start with financial advisors. They used simple accounts, basic funds, and automated contributions. Professional help came much later. Advisors typically enter later, not for returns, but for complexity. Taxes, multiple accounts, retirement income, and estate planning. Housing is the biggest fixed expense. Millionaires consistently keep it low relative to income. That margin protects savings, enables investing, and absorbs life shocks. Federal Reserve data shows a clear pattern. Millionaire households spend less of their income on housing, even when they can afford more. Lower housing costs leave room for saving and investing. Higher housing costs restrict cash flow and slow wealth accumulation. Federal Reserve data shows an inverse relationship. As net worth increases, debt-to-income ratios fall. Lower debt reduces fixed obligations and frees cash flow. That cash flow sustains long-term investing. Survey data shows a consistent pattern. Millionaire households are more likely to buy once and stay put for decades. Frequent home upgrades increase fixed costs and reset savings. Staying put preserves cash flow for long-term investing. Federal Reserve data shows another difference. Non-millionaire households hold most of their net worth in their home. Millionaire households hold a smaller share in housing and a larger share in investments. Compounding assets drive long-term growth. The sequence matters. Federal Reserve data shows many households reached millionaire status before upgrading their homes. Building wealth first preserves cash flow. Upgrading later avoids resetting progress. Housing acts as a constraint. Higher housing costs compress saving and investing capacity. Lower housing costs preserve cash flow flexibility. The data links that flexibility to sustained investing over time. The data shows a structural difference. Non-millionaire households tend to maximize lifestyle to income. Millionaire households preserve margin and optionality. That margin sustains saving and investing across income changes. Federal Reserve data highlights 5 decisions that dominate long-term wealth outcomes. Housing is the largest and most constraining. Education, career, partner choice, and investment behavior follow. Getting these roughly right matters more than small optimizations. When housing takes over 40% of income, savings drop close to zero. Cutting small expenses doesn't change that. Fixed housing costs decide whether investing can happen at all. Take 2 households earning the same income. One chooses high housing costs, the other doesn't. The second household invests consistently. The first struggles to invest at all.
Millionaire households treat housing margin as fixed. They choose homes that leave excess cash flow. That margin allows saving and investing to continue through income changes.
Take 2 households with the same income. One commits to a much higher housing payment. The other doesn't. Over time, only one can invest consistently. This is the upgrade cycle. As income rises, housing expands to absorb it. Each upgrade resets progress. Compounding never gets time to work. This is the sequence millionaires follow. Wealth compounds first. Housing stays stable. Upgrades come later, after independence is already built. Higher income helps. But time matters more. Staying invested longer beats earning more for fewer years. Compounding isn't linear. Early years feel slow, then growth accelerates. Most gains arrive late, after patience pays off. Most millionaires aren't young. Wealth builds slowly for decades. The payoff usually arrives late, after consistency compounds over time. Most millionaires didn't inherit wealth. They built it gradually. Small, repeated investing beats one-time advantages over decades. Millionaires didn't time markets. They invested through highs, crashes, and recoveries. Consistency mattered more than timing. Most millionaires didn't use complexity. They stuck with simple investments. Held consistently, those outperformed complicated strategies over time. Most millionaires didn't feel ready. They started anyway. Participation came first. Confidence followed with time. Markets create fear. Millionaires felt it too. The difference was simple. They stayed invested instead of exiting. Crashes aren't the biggest risk. Quitting early is. Most long-term gains arrive after the point where most people stop. Wealth isn't one decision. It's a system of habits. Saving, investing, controlling big costs, and staying invested, working together. There's no secret here. Wealth builds slowly. Simple habits, repeated consistently, beat intensity over time. When you strip away the noise, the data is consistent. Wealth isn't built by hacks or perfect timing. It's built by repeatable behaviors applied over decades. This is what the data says. Now compare it to what you've seen in real life. Does this match how wealth is actually built around you? If this helped clarify how wealth is actually built, share it with someone who needs evidence instead of hype, and follow for more data-driven breakdowns.